Welcome online now. Check whether it is online now.
Now display that your notification heard here.
This is fine now. This much we can make it look like this now. No problem.
It's taking time. Okay. Actually, your notification sound has been heard in this.
Their notification it is.
Not yours, no? Sure.
No, everything is mute here. Nothing can go.
Okay, so I think we are good to go. I request Ma'am Beena to please carry forward.
Good morning, Father. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
The light.
No.
The limit of the height of your achievement is to reach your dreams and willingness to work hard for them. A very good morning to all. Hearty welcome to the National Level Virtual Conference on Inclusiveness and Diversity in Higher Education in the light of NEP 2020. The National Education Policy 2020 marks as a monumental development in the nation's educational system with ambitious reforms to meet 21st century skills agenda. Change is inevitable, and adaptability to change makes a society future ready. I implore Father Carlos to invoke God's blessing as a symbol to mark the auspicious beginning of the conference.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
St. Vincent Pallotti College takes pride in organizing with the experts and becoming the torchbearers of this inclusiveness and diversification higher education system. Welcoming is an inherent custom of any culture. I feel privileged to extend my warm welcome to Reverend Father Gilbert Mascarenhas, Director, St. Vincent Pallotti College, in his absentia. I extend a warm welcome to Dr. Ejerome Xavier, Principal, St. Vincent Pallotti College. Welcome, sir. A hearty welcome to Reverend Father Mervyn Frank, Vice Principal of the college. Welcome, Father. The National Education Policy is the first educational policy of the 21st century and aims to address the many growing development imperatives of the country. This policy proposes the revision and revamping of all aspects of education structure, including its regulation and governance, to create a new system that has been aligned with aspirational goals of the 21st education, while building upon India's traditions and value system. The aim of education in ancient India was not just acquisition of knowledge, has preparation for life in this world or beyond schooling, but for the completion and realization and liberalization of oneself. I request Father Mervyn Frank, Vice Principal, St. Vincent Pallotti College, to resonate his thoughts on inclusiveness and diversity in the light of NEP 2020.
Respected organizers and participants, a very good morning to you all. Benjamin Barber, an eminent political theorist, once said, "I don't divide the world into the weak and the strong, or the successes and the failures. I divide the world into the learners and non-learners." What on earth would make someone a non-learner? Everyone is born with an intense drive to learn. Infants stretch their skills daily, not just ordinary skills, but the most difficult task of our lifetime, like learning to walk and talk. They never decide it's too hard or not worth the effort. They walk, they fall, and they get up. What could put an end to this exuberant learning? Benjamin Barber says, the fixed mindset is one of the reasons. Having said this, Government of India has come up with the idea of break the routine education by introducing the National Education Policy. The policy aims at to bring in radical structural change in the educational policy in India. The policy has been lauded for bringing in some positive change. The definition of inclusive education by UNICEF is twofold. First, it means to have all children in the same schools and classrooms. And the second, it goes a step further to mean real learning opportunities for children who have been traditionally excluded. However, the ambit of inclusivity in education as a whole is much broader. It not only deals with the receiving an education, but also its components, including what is the education about and how effectively it is imparted. According to NEP, education should ideally be holistic, acknowledging the varied histories and identities of people and adjusted to current time situations. As a society, our history has been fraught with severe discriminatory and exclusionary practices, thereby making inclusive education the need of the hour in India. The need for substantial equality has been repeated time and again, especially with the formation and subsequent enactment of our Constitution. Education and job opportunities started being looked at as important pathways to better socio-economic hardships and break free from chains of the past. Since the challenge to achieve these goals is multidimensional. Therefore, given the Indian context that reeks of historical discrimination, lack of explicit inclusionary policies would automatically render the education system exclusionary in its approach. The National Education Policy 2020 promises to bring revolutionary changes through equitable and inclusive education. The diversity of India demands comprehensive changes and flexibility in the education system so that the policy can be implemented as per the needs of the diverse population. Therefore, a multidisciplinary approach is required to tackle this problem. Having this in mind, with the management of St. Vincent Pallotti College at Bangalore have organized national level virtual conference on inclusiveness and diversity in higher education in the light of NEP 2020. So wishing you all a wonderful knowledge-filled day. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. True leadership lies in the ability to serve. I request Dr. E. Jerome Xavier, Principal, St. Vincent Polity College, to welcome the gathering and introduce the keynote speaker for the day. Sir, you're not audible, sir. Can you please unmute yourself?
Dear Dr. Ponmudi, the chief guest for today's national conference, which is virtual, Reverend Father Gilbert, the director, Father Mervyn, the vice principal, Father Carlos, the organizers, learned men and women participants in today's virtual conference on inclusiveness and diversity in higher education in the light of National Education Policy 2020. A very warm welcome to each one of you. We appreciate your willingness and acknowledge your inquisitiveness and openness to new thoughts and ideas. A few years ago, while meeting a group of teachers, Pope Francis urged them to promote a culture of encounter in the classroom. He said that the challenge is to educate students, be open and interested in other people, respecting their different histories, their strengths and weaknesses, their limitations and resources. Inclusiveness and diversity is not a novel philosophical thought or policy. It has been the core value and culture of most of our institutions. Nevertheless, in the light of NEP 2020, we look at it as a student-centric policy wherein students of different culture, social background, and diversified intellectual ability can spend 1, 2, 3, or 4 years making it available, affordable, and accessible for everyone. In a developing country like India, our needs are diversified. So are the programs offered. The eminent speakers of today's conference, I'm sure, will speak at length and depth on the inclusiveness and diversity in terms of student enrollment, staff selection process, curriculum and content development and its implementation, skill development and competency building programs, inventiveness and innovativeness, and research culture. To set the tone and create a mindset to all of us to this framework of inclusiveness and diversity, we have an outstanding personality in the field of higher education, Dr. Mudiraj. I am associated with Dr. Mudiraj for the last 25 years. Dr. Mudiraj is currently the National Advisor for NAC of India. But he began his career as a lecturer in the Department of Statistics in Christ College, Bangalore, and then he moved to Loyola College, Chennai, both day college as well as the evening college. And he was and he is still continuing to be a visiting faculty to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel National Institute of Textile Management, Coimbatore. Dr. Mudiraj is a prolific writer, great orator. He is thoroughly well versed with NAC accreditation process as he is in it for the last 25 years. Almost every criterion and sub-criterion in each of these 7 criteria is in his fingertips. You will understand the way he will share his thoughts with you will confirm what I have been sharing with you. In addition to his teaching and 29 years of educational administrative experience, his special interests are training of assessors for quality assurance and quality literacy. He has published number of research papers in reputed national and international journals, as well as articles in books. He has presented papers in national and international conferences and seminars. He had organized national level assessors training program and a trainer for the same. He has been associated with an international research project. He is also a resource person for many conferences and seminars, not only in Karnataka, but all over India and abroad. To his credit, he has visited nearly 400 colleges all over India during his 25 years of service with NAC. In addition to all this, he has rich and vast international experience, which has taken him to United Kingdom, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Thailand, Australia, Cambodia, France, Belgium, Spain, Switzerland, and Nepal. He has undergone training in Australia for quality assurance, peer review, and visited a couple of Australian universities. As an international expert, he was a member of the accreditation committee for the Department of Architecture, American International University, Bangladesh, Dhaka. Certainly, it is our honor and we are privileged to have such an eminent personality who is well versed not only in the process of accreditation by NAC, but also a resourceful person in terms of National Education Policy 2020. I've heard him speaking a couple of times, and therefore we requested him particularly to share his thoughts and initiate this conference with his innovative ideas in inclusiveness and diversity. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Ponmudi. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Jerome, for the words of introduction. And let me, I have a presentation, but I do not know. I congratulate the management, the director, Reverend Father Dr. Gilbert Mascarenas, SAC, and Reverend Father Dr. Marvin, Frank, the Vice Principal of the college, other religious, teaching faculty members, and my good friend Dr. Jerome, the compeer and the introducer and the MC Bina, and faculty from other institutions, people who are watching live other than this Google, our Meet, and Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever on the social media. I'll just take a couple of minutes. I saw legends like Professor Jeevan Kumar and others are there, the former finance officer, Bangalore University, and other resource persons are my colleagues. I congratulate St. Vincent Pallotti College, Chalikara, Kalyan Nagar, Bangalore, the IQAC and the research cell of having a national level virtual conference on inclusiveness and diversity in higher education. So I would like to have two thoughts. Happy to know about this young colleges organizing on NEP. As Marvin talked about in the initially, he said about the NEP. I wish all the teachers, teaching faculty, very important in addition to your subject domain, you must read that 66-page document, the National Education Policy 2020, especially on the chapters related to higher education. I wish everybody could read it and you would have read it. I hope. Otherwise, you can always read it, and it's a very beautiful document. It was a 477-page draft document, which was approved by the Government of India, Honorable Cabinet Government of India on 29 July 2020. And Government of India is in various forms putting forth for implementation. For example, academic bank of credits, multiple entry, multiple exit, and credit transfer. Many things are coming, and some of the other things also will be coming as a law. And before that, they will ask for feedback also. You can provide your feedback on each of the items. Okay, very important, these things on the NEP. Now, and the second part which I wanted to talk to you all is about accreditation, because you've invited me as an advisor from NAC, so I thought I should talk about accreditation, especially the provisional accreditation, which recently the UGC and NAC and with all the authorities of NAC we have launched. So we're expecting all the 60,000, almost whatever 60 number of colleges to get accredited, and all the universities in India to get accredited. So the country can project. We can project it we are all fully in the quality map. So that people ask several questions. I'll come to that later. So in this keynote address, I want to talk about the NEP. NEP is a broad document, the policy. The policy gets implemented as a law, as a gazette notifications and orders and things like that. So one important thing is inclusiveness. And the diversity is captured. How you can say that? People say. When you go through all the policy documents from the beginning, Radha Krishna Committee, next document, much before there were documents. As people, when they do B.Ed, they study all these documents. Other teachers also should go through these documents. In addition to that, the University Grants Commission, Ministry of Education, Government of India, and the state government, your university, affiliating university, will make so many documents in their website. Planning, execution, Planning and Development Board, affiliate, Dean CDC, Director College Development Council, how to help colleges, like a big brother approach. How to make ease of affiliation, making everything very simple, without any complication. Transparent, fast movement. So these things are very important in the national education policy, which is already enshrined. Now, on the inclusiveness, if you see, I would like to talk about three things. The document talks about three values: Indian values, constitutional values, human values. More than 27 to 30 points they have put, like love, sacrifice, loyalness, faithfulness, thankfulness, truthfulness, integrity. They have talked about patriotism. They talked about, you must see the values which they have defined in the policy, which talks about human values, constitutional values, Indian values, and Indian ethos. Very important on the national education policy. So many colleges should get inclusive education. Inclusiveness, we talk about SC, ST, OBC, MBC, minorities, and educationally disadvantaged groups, the poorest of the poor, reaching the unreached, immaterial of caste, creed, and religion. How to reach out to people and make them as part of the system, in teaching staff, in non-teaching staff, among the students, boys and girls. When you say boys and girls, when you talk about diversity, gender is very important. Gender does not mean only about men and women. It includes transgender. Transgender. That means transgender also should be included. We don't deny, if people apply as a student, as a non-teaching staff, as a teaching staff. So this is about inclusiveness. When you talk about inclusiveness, it is not about money. I talked about the socially, economically disadvantaged group, and I talked about the gender. It also talks about educational disadvantaged, or what we can call learning disadvantaged groups. It is not about first bench, last bench, middle bench. It is about people who are advanced learners, people who are slow learners, people who have some problem with mathematics, science, and English. We have all huge seminars, and I'm not talking about the big dyslexia and other things. So you have to be inclusive approach. So it's a very big word. If you go through the NEP, it talks about the institutional development goals. All at the macro level, they talk. We have to split it up. How inclusiveness can happen in the committees. It can be in a cultural committee, in the sports committee. It can be in a small competition of your volleyball tournament, a basketball tournament, or a quiz, or your subject association, or your amateur club, or your NSS, NCC, Youth Red Cross, or any of your clubs, chemistry club, history club. So inclusiveness, you don't only look at it in a very, very small, narrow-minded. It's a very, very big word. I'm not giving you thesaurus or Oxford meaning of it. And the diversity is very important. People from, when we don't talk about North India, South India, East India, Northeast India, Leh, Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir, Rajasthan. We don't talk this. We all talk about diversity, unity in diversity. So we have to take people from across, people from Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, mostly the home state, we take care. So this is an important part of diversity, including international students, international faculty, international exposure. So diversity is diverse thought process. When you sit in a committee, when you sit in the management, when you sit in the staff room, when you discuss with the non-teaching staff or a canteen staff or a vendor or a purchase committee, you want to purchase something, know, sir, that the management will take care. They will take care. But if at all any teachers have any role in the participative management system, any need analysis, you have BSCA, you have BCom, you have BSc. You wanted to expand the courses. Slowly you want to expand. Because NEP talks about mergers. If you have 2-3 colleges, you have to merge. On one point of time, every college will give its own degree. You have to get accreditation. You have to give an accredited, you have to start giving, going from a graded autonomy. You have to move towards the quality ladder. So many things are there. But I would like to restrict myself in the light of the National Education Policy 2020. I urge all the people who are on live in YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the current faculty members of St. Vincent Pallotti College and all the people to please read the NEP document. Please register with NAD, National Academic Depository, Academic Bank of Credits. Please follow all the UGC regulations. UGC keeps on giving you guidance, regulations. Go through the website of UGC, www.ugc.ac.in. Go to website of NAC, www.nac.gov.in. If you have any professional courses, go to AICTE website. And the AICTE has come out with a portal for all colleges to register for innovations. Please go through those. Don't say, so sir, we are arts and science college. Don't say that. Go and see. Technical education also offers so many new innovations and other things. Participate in ranking, NARF. Very important. We have a good leader. You have a good batch of young people. So please innovate. Please take care of the institution so that when the institution grows, when the institution comes up, you will be able to know. So this is very important. So this is what I wanted to say. And I would like to just close it. I would like to close it by just saying only one word. As I spoke about the diversity of NEP, I just wanted to talk about the provisional accreditation for colleges. I urge you all to help the neighboring colleges, government colleges, tribal colleges, rural colleges. Just simple 10 questions. Quantitative questions 10, qualitative questions 15. Simple upload of documents. 20 questions we are asking. People also criticize us. Oh, it is a miniature version. Yes, it is a miniature version. People, lot of criticisms are most welcome. Sir, why we wanted to full accreditation? What is provisional accreditation? What is the difference? There are 50 questions there. From 100, 200 questions, you have brought the manual to 55 questions, 57. Now it is a miniature version of 20 questions. Is that suffice? We give you for 2 years. I urge entire people who are watching to go through this. Go through this and please be resource person and help others, help other colleges. I talk in the positive sense, not about consultants getting a lot of doing other things. No, I'm not talking about that. As IQAC coordinators, as a principal, as a college, helping the other colleges, government colleges, adopt them, guide them to get provisional accreditation. Okay, it is this is got institutional building. Not only I should be good, my neighboring colleges also should be good. My taluka should be good. My district should be good. Chalikare should be good. Kalyan Nagar, we should all the colleges, engineering colleges, self-financing, private, aided, unaided, government. We will help them, including the university, our big brother. We will give guidance because we know whatever the service we want to offer to them also. So this is about provisional accreditation. I urge the management and the staff, everybody, once the software is ready, we will put it on the website. Please apply for provisional accreditation and get accredited for 2 years. After 2 years, again apply for 2 more years for provisional accreditation. Then you can come for full accreditation. If you're confident, you can come for full accreditation, no problem. No need for provisional. Come for full accreditation. 5 years data, if you have good work you have done based on your performance, we do accreditation. So please come forward. Very simple questions we are asking. Very easy, nothing difficult. Very, very easy. Very easy. Okay. So nothing to worry. And we were there to help you and guide you, NAC. And I thank all the organizers for helping me. They told me 5 to 20 minutes, but normally I take 5-6 minutes. Otherwise, I have some presentations. And I wish all the resource persons the best wishes, and the panelists, uh, and the people from the different universities. I see people from Amity University, people perhaps across the globe, and live YouTube people, Twitter and Facebook. Namaskar and best wishes. And please help all the other colleges for provisional accreditation. As students and people, please, it is on the website. Please participate in pilot also. Pilot also. Once a pilot is the pilot study also, you can participate. Please do that and help NAC. Jai Hind. Namaskar, Dr. Beena.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar, Principal Ji.
This day will be remembered as a milestone in St. Vincent Pallotti College, as this important event has been rightly graced by Dr. B.S. Mudiraj, advisor NAC, who is an educationalist, researcher, and administrator, with his deep wisdom and vast experience and high priority to enhance higher education system. We are sure that your message will be a pace setter and your profound thoughts and your perspectives will inspire the proceedings of this conference and make this a truly impactful event. Thank you, sir. We express a heartfelt thanks to Reverend Father Gilbert Mascarenas, Director, St. Vincent Pallotti College, for your presence today. Thank you, Father. A token of gratitude to our beloved principal, Dr. Ejerome Xavier, who has been a pillar of support in all our endeavors. Thank you, sir. I thank Reverend Father Mervyn Frank, the Vice Principal of the college, for his constant support and guidance. Thank you, sir. St. Vincent Pallotti College expresses a deep sense of appreciation to Father Carlos, Head Department of Arts and Humanities, for organizing the national level virtual conference. I, on behalf of St. Vincent Pallotti College and management, my sincere thanks and gratitude to all the participants. We have come to the end of the inaugural program. Kindly note, the technical session will commence shortly. Thank you for joining us. I request Ms. Navita Angelin to kindly take over the session.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Beena, can I leave? To Jeevan Kumar, Finance Officer, Bangalore University.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Madura, nice listening to you.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you, Ji. Namaskar, people from Amity University.
Professor Jeevan Kumar, thank you for joining us.
If you wanted to ask some questions, give my email ID or mobile numbers, because I see Amity University, Ja sir, and so many people asking in the messages. Since it's a keynote address, I don't mind taking it, but you can give my mobile numbers and email IDs. They can raise, I will definitely reply.
Sure, Dr. Pandit.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Curiosity is the beginning of knowledge, but understanding is the beginning of wisdom. Warm greetings to all. Hi, Ms. Navita Angelina, at Department of Business Administration, your host for the session. I extend a very warm welcome to all on behalf of St. Vincent Pallotti College, who have taken a time out to connect with us on Technical Session 1 on inclusiveness and diversity in competency building and skill development in pedagogy. Before proceeding with session, dear participants, few instructions to be noted. If you have any questions to be asked during the presentation, please type them in the chat box. Kindly place your mic on mute and don't click on present, requesting your kind cooperation and attention throughout the session. I extend a hearty welcome to Dr. Cherian Alexander, former HOD, Department of English, St. Joseph's College Autonomous. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and gracing us virtually. Now I request Mrs. Preeta, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, to introduce the resource person. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. A very pleasant morning to one and all present here. Today's resource person is Dr. Cherian Alexander. It is indeed a great honor and privilege for me to introduce Dr. Cherian. He has served as an Associate Professor of English and HOD of Department of English at St. Joseph's College for more than 36 years and continues his contribution to the field of education as an advisory in the college. Dr. Cherian has also published articles in magazines and newspapers, edited various books, and also given several radio talks both on air and Ganwali. He has been a part of textbook committees for both PU Board and Bangalore University. He has guided 4 research scholars for PhD so far. Dr. Cherian's first priority is to be an inspiring and stimulating teacher. Today's topic of discussion is inclusiveness and diversity in competency building and skill development in pedagogy. We are extremely pleased and happy to have you with us today, sir, and we look forward for an informative session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I also would like to check whether I can share screen. Have you given me that facility?
One second. Take the photo.
You can share your screen.
Okay. That's present now, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, I think I should be doing a window. One second, please. Just hold on.
You want to have just, sir? Cherian, good morning, Cherian.
Good morning, sir. So nice to see you.
Yeah, I have read a lot of your articles on newspaper. A lot of your articles.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, we will come to it in a bit. But first, I'd like to just say thank you very much for this invitation from the directors of your wonderful institution, Vincent Pallotti, to Dr. Jerome, who personally called me, to Dr. Mudiraj and others who are there, other resource persons. I feel very incompetent today to talk about this subject because I am not in any policy making role. I have not been in any policy making role except in small ways inside my institution. I therefore would like to just talk informally and to talk from the point of view of my own personal, quite subjective in its own way, experience across 40 years with this whole issue of inclusivity in the classroom. The broader, bigger institutional and national issues I don't feel I have the competence to address. But perhaps from the point of view of how inclusivity plays out in our classrooms, I think I'd be able to hopefully contribute something to this growing discussion, that and the deliberations that you're all going to have today. I can at the moment only see my screen. That is what I've shared. I cannot see. Is there any way I can minimize the other one also and have that appear on the? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah. I think it's. There's some issue there. What I'll do is it the case that when I present the screen, then the image of all the people, participants, and all that vanishes? Is that the case? Is that the normal thing? Because when I go to the screen, then I don't see anything else, only the screen matter. But I hope you're able to hear me.
Yes, sir, we are able to see you and hear you as well. Only when we are sharing the screen, we can see only the screen that is shared.
Okay, fine. I'll just, maybe what I'll do is I'll redo the whole thing once again. Just bear with me for a minute or two.
No problem, sir.
Right. Now, you see, there are 2 or 3 reports that have, come in recent times that are a little quite enlightening about the state of higher education and specifically the issue of inclusivity in India in recent years. Now, the thing is that all these have been kind of preparatory to the big document that has been produced recently and that is now already implemented in Karnataka, the National Education Policy. And it is in many ways a groundbreaking document which offers hope, if properly implemented, for quality education, both at the primary level, at the school level, and at the university or higher educational institutional level. And it is this that we need to focus on. And I think all our deliberations today are about this, specifically the issue of inclusivity. I would just like to read this report very quickly, go over this with you. It's a report from the Brookings Institution, a partner institution of the Brookings Institution here in India. And they've studied some of the progress that has happened in recent years, but also some of the problems and challenges that still remain in the area of inclusivity in higher education in India. India, I'm just reading from here so you can follow on the screen with me. India has seen a dramatic increase in the capacity of its higher education sector in the last 2 decades. Enrollment in higher education has increased 4-fold since 2001, with a gross enrollment ratio of 26.3%. We are close to achieving the target of 32% GER by 2020. This of course, had appeared in 2018, this particular report. However, many important questions such as the quality of higher education institutions and employment of graduates merit further examination. In this report, we address these questions by examining the enrollment trend and patterns, graduation and employment patterns, and the quality assurance framework for HEIs in India. We also track the policy shifts that enable this expansion. We offer context to India's expansion by comparing it to other countries. We also compare the growth of India's higher education sector to that of China over the last 25 years. Of course, that's what they're saying in their report. I'm not going into that report, which is a very detailed, almost book-length thing, but here they're giving a brief overview of what they're attempting to do. These are some of their overall conclusions, which they, of course, express in great detail with statistics in their report. Despite the increasing numbers of professional colleges, 3-year degrees in arts, commerce, and sciences remain the most popular programs, as evidenced by high enrollment rates. India has seen a rapid expansion in the higher education sector since 2001. There has been a dramatic rise in the number of higher education institutions and enrollment has increased fourfold. The Indian higher education system is now one of the largest in the world, with 51,649 institutions. Despite, so that is something, my comment on that section is, that's something to cheer about, because we do have a tremendous expansion of educational institutions, higher educational institutions in India. I don't think there is any village in India that is more than half a day's journey away from a reasonably good educational institution, at least in most parts of the country, and certainly so in the south, where the density is much higher. But despite the increased access to higher education in India, and I'm reading from this point here, despite the increased access to higher education in India, challenges remain. Low employability of graduates, poor quality of teaching, weak governance, insufficient funding, and complex regulatory norms continue to plague the sector. India's gross enrollment ratio in 2018-19 was 26.3%, but still far from meeting the Ministry of Human Resource Development's target of achieving 32% gross enrollment ratio by 2022. I don't have the data on what is current at 2022. Perhaps some of you here might have a better picture of this and might know if this 32% has been achieved or not. I would not know. But it's worth researching and finding out. The next point here, as the government evaluates proposals to reform the University Grants Commission and implement the recently proposed draft New Education Policy 2019, this Brookings India report takes a wider view of reforms necessary to respond to challenges facing higher education in India today. It examines the capacity of HEIs with respect to students as well as teachers, governance and accountability, funding and affordability, research and innovation, and regulatory regime to create globally relevant and competitive ecosystems that can produce employable graduates and sophisticated knowledge workers. We'll go over that again. I'll repeat. It examines the capacity of HEIs with respect to students as well as teachers. Those two are very important, students as well as teachers. Governance and accountability, funding and affordability, research and innovation, and regulatory regime to create a globally relevant and competitive ecosystem that can produce employable graduates and sophisticated knowledge workers. The exponential growth of the sector has been due to the increased demand for higher education. The higher education sector has grown across all levels and disciplines. However, broad trends and patterns in enrollment, graduation, and placement suggest that access to higher education continues to remain a challenge, especially at the postgraduate level. Given the low proportion of students that go on to pursue postgraduate and doctoral education, a shortage of qualified teachers is a further problem that is plaguing even the best universities in India. High entry barriers, poor incentive structures, stringent tenure rules, and rigid promotion practices lead to a limited supply of faculty. Faculty shortage, low inputs available for research, and inadequate industry linkages amplify the existing limited uptake of good quality independent research in HEIs across all disciplines. We find that while countries like the United States, China, and South Korea have invested in research to build a skilled, productive, and flexible labor force, HEIs in India, in contrast, lack the culture of independent academic research. We'll return to this point in a bit. The higher education sector in India is crippled due to the lack of financial, academic, and administrative autonomy granted to institutions. Overall, this has resulted in the poor quality of institutions as well as education. Under the affiliating university model, the supervisory authority for most colleges is the university or a government authority. Both lack the capacity to effectively regulate their constituent colleges and hold them accountable. In contrast, autonomous HEIs are at an advantage since they have the power to constitute their own academic councils and make decisions on academic matters. I'll just skip over that and then we'll talk about this. Several proposals, committees, and draft policies in the last decade have suggested the need to revamp the University Grants Commission in order to resolve the numerous roadblocks in and this is the important segment of that sentence, over-regulated regime in the Indian higher education sector. Now, having looked at this, and this is the broad picture, we've got to also look at the broader issue of why we are having this discussion in the first place, and that's because of our country's peculiar or unique social and economic problems, challenges, which we in the higher education sector are called upon to face, and in our own ways, in our own places, do the best we can to address. And that is, historically, India has been a place where there has been historical injustice over not just centuries but millennia to certain sections of our people. And this kind of unequal growth, like going back to the distant past, you can see how the broad dominant discourse of the educated classes or the elites in India has overtly in their texts affirmed or supported a socio-economic structure that is unequal, and that is clear in the texts from the ancient past. We have wonderfully, emancipatory texts like the great Upanishads, which talk about Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. As an ideal, it is wonderful and great, and we should get back to that and really see, introspect and see if we have been true to that call that was made in ancient India thousands of years ago. If we examine ourselves against that benchmark, we find that we have historically fallen far. Yes. Hello? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. I thought I heard an interruption, a question or something?
No, sir.
Okay. Can I go on?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, yeah, sure. So the thing is that historically then we have to, when we look back, we've been talking about reviving all the great ideals of ancient India. And this is definitely the ideal that we have to hold up above everything else. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, which means all beings everywhere enjoy well-being. And what does well-being therefore mean? It means justice, social justice for all, opportunities for all. On the other hand, sadly, unfortunately, in the later eras, we have texts that actually perpetuate discriminatory practices, such as certain sections of the Manusmriti. Certain sections are philosophically wonderful, but certain sections of the Manusmriti, for example, clearly militate against equality or equity, social equity, equality of opportunities. Now, this is true in many parts of the world and in other religions also, not just exclusive to India. But, here we have historically a large proportion, a significant proportion of our people who have been officially denied education by official policy, in fact, in ancient India. They've been, in other words, they've been relegated to the world of manual labor by birth. this is what ails our society, and the sooner we address this, I'm not saying that we have not addressed this. Our constitution is a wonderful document that has aimed to, promote and amplify and increase the speed of inclusivity, and many government efforts, including reservations and other such schemes and so on, have been established in order to make sure that there is inclusivity. So there is no doubt that efforts are being made, but they are not yet kind of bearing the kind of fruit we would like to see. And it is, let's hope that in our classrooms, in our institutions, we will begin to see this in bigger ways and in more visible ways going forward. So progress has been made, but not enough to ensure inclusivity. There's a lot more left to do. There is miles to go before we sleep, to use Robert Frost's very resonant expression in his great poem. So this is the broad historical situation in which we find ourselves placed as institutions of higher education. I think all of us, whether private or government or private aided, different kinds of educational institutions, must strive to see if we are honestly implementing even the national standards of inclusivity in terms of admission to people from the socio-economically deprived groups. I think the SEDGs, as the document puts it. Are we cutting corners, and taking only the ones we want, and just paying lip service to these requirements of inclusivity in our admission policies? A lot of soul searching needs to be done in this area by all institutions across the board. Every year when the institution begins its academic year, it's important to check the admissions and see whether people in the nearby areas that the institution serves who need an education are given the opportunity to the extent possible, number of seats permitting, but the maximum effort needs to be put to make sure. One of the ways this can be done, of course, is to do a survey in the immediate neighborhoods where one's educational institution is situated. Actually, this can be a research project for students. They can go house to house and find out, especially from the poorer areas of the neighborhood, whether adolescents and those who are of college age from working class families, how many of them have enrolled in colleges? How many of them have dropped out? How many of them are simply not keen on going to college because of all kinds of barriers that they perceive, etc. A kind of statistical database of the area where the institution is located might be a good way of looking at making the institution oriented and sensitive towards the immediate neighborhood. But this can mean an area of a radius of at least 5 kilometers, around one's institution. So that's definitely one way in which, the institution's sensitivity to the needs around it, especially of those from the underprivileged groups, can be undertaken. Now, I'd like to just go over some of these points, a little more carefully and reflect on that with you. We will do well to reflect on these questions here, the funding and affordability, governance and accountability, funding and affordability, research and innovation, and then looking at this regulatory regime. Perhaps others, resource persons here from the NAC and so on, can throw light on that. But all our educational institutions are challenged, of course, by funding and affordability. The again here, I am not. It is outside my area of competence to comment on funding and accountability. So, just as a layperson in this field, I just I'm thinking aloud with you. What are the big barriers to making our courses affordable? Of course, one is that our institutions, if they don't receive government funding, will have to pay for expensive and increasingly expensive facilities, labs and libraries and buildings, rooms, classrooms, etc., equipment. All of these things cost a lot of money. Then, of course, the question of paying teachers' salaries. Now, we must, of course, education is a vocation, and teachers should, above everything else, come into this profession not seeing it as merely a job, but as a calling, and therefore a certain amount of a little bit of sacrificial, service is important. But one cannot hope to have teachers live on ideals and fresh air. They have to have a decent income, which will free them from the burdens of having to worry about all those things and throw their full attention into their mission of teaching, learning, mentoring, counseling, all kinds of things that they're called upon to do. If a teacher is paid poorly, then that teacher's attention on to his or her mission will, to that extent, be weakened because of the burden that of making two ends meet, which will keep preoccupying them, which is the reason why teachers have to be paid reasonably well. And so that becomes a part of the cost of an educational institution. These these factors are what complicate often and create this gap between the ideal and the reality in our institutions. Here, as revenue models, one, of course, would be dependence on the government. If the government funds a private institution, then that is quite a lot of burden taken away from the institution in terms of its revenue model. But if there is no government funding, then the institution has to raise that money through fees, and fees can be very steep. If one has to make sure that all these things are paid for, and if that's the only source of funding, so which means that if the fees are very high, then people from the SCDGs cannot come into an institution that is known for its quality because they just can't afford that those high volumes of tuition fees. Now, of course, there is the possibility of loans, student loans. Now, if you look at this whole question of student loans, it is fraught with all kinds of uncertainties and risks. You want to compare that with a country like the United States, where higher education is very expensive and scholarships are limited. Then there's been a massive dependence on student loans in that country, and the recent experience with student loans has shown that many students are so heavily indebted even after they leave with their degrees, and even after they get employment, they are so underemployed that they are simply unable to pay back this debt. So this became an election issue in the 2020 elections. This whole question with President Biden, at that time candidate Biden, promising to remove from the shoulders of these students the burden of student debt and student loans. I don't think he has been successful in getting the U.S. legislature or Congress to pass those laws. So it's very, very difficult of course, we have student loans given in India, but this is so linked to employability, so that everything here is therefore interconnected. We might think that these are all separate compartments, but they are all interconnected. Teacher quality, the quality of the teacher, is connected to employability of students, because if teachers don't bring the capability to develop skills in their students, employability skills, then the students become unemployable. And if they are unemployable and if they've taken loans, then they just can't afford to pay back, because and they will be stuck with this debt burden, legal ramifications, all kinds of problems. So that revenue model has those problems. On the other hand, one could look at private-public partnerships, with the government chipping in a bit, and private foundations, philanthropies, etc., bringing in funds, to help people. Here, I think I'm just wondering. I'm thinking aloud, and this might sound naive to you, but I'm just wondering about this whole question of crowdfunding. Of late, this seems to have been very successful. And there are already companies like Keto and others which are doing crowdfunding fairly successfully for poor people who can't afford medical insurance, but who find themselves, needing money for surgery and emergency treatment and so on. This model seems to be working in the field of medical charity. Why can't something like this be done? And here again, I don't have the knowledge about how to, but I'm sure people in this field of finance and philanthropy and foundations, commerce, all the interconnections between them can put their heads together and see if a viable model of the kind that we see with crowdfunding organizations like Keto, if that can be arranged. So that's another model. Then, of course, there's the model of depending on one's alumni. And here, I think our higher educational institutions have not, my feeling is that they've not done enough to tap this wonderful potential. You'll be surprised how even those students, some of whom you thought were just average or mediocre and so on, academically, but they had other skills, you see. They graduate from your institution and they end up actually in fairly good jobs. If you check 5 or 10 years later, you'll find that they are employed well with reasonably good incomes. Now, the reason why the source of alumni as a source of funding is not adequately tapped in our country, I think is because colleges don't do enough to follow up on their graduates after they leave their institution. One of the things that a graduate who leaves an institution looks forward to is the institution constantly staying in touch with the alumnus, like sending newsletters from time to time, etc. Alumni feel very irritated if 3 years and 4 years pass without the institution, sending any newsletter or any, something like even one of the things that institutions can do is to even wish someone on their birthdays, things like gestures like that. And then suddenly 5 years later, they're tapped for funds, you see. So it has to be a two-way relationship. the institution should make sure that alumni are constantly kept in touch with. They are informed about the developments in the college. They are invited to events in the college, etc. Whether they come or not, they may be busy. It's a different matter, but the invitation should be extended. So this way, I think alumni become a big pool to tap in order to get funding. So these are just, again, very, very amateur thinking aloud on my side. I'm not an expert in these fields, but I'm thinking along with you people, looking at these things as possibilities going forward. Right. I think I'll pause here. I've spoken for quite some time, and I don't know whether you want me to stop or whether there's a little more time for me to. How are we doing for time?
Sir, you can continue, sir. There are 15 more minutes are there. You can carry on.
15 minutes more. I have a few more points to add. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There is this whole thing of capacity building, in higher education. One of the things that each institution can do is to identify those students with an aptitude for advanced level studies and research, and nurture them and guide them into academic institutions of higher learning. If, for example, if your institution doesn't have a doctoral program or a PG program, you can make sure that they go into higher education, because as this point makes clear here, there is a shortage of qualified teachers, because not enough people are going into postgraduate and doctoral education. So one of the ways in which institutions can share information with each other is to inform each other of good quality of students with the right aptitude for doctoral education, and alert each other, create a database or pool, so that these people can then be guided and nurtured, counseled, to pursue doctoral education. Many students might need to have their confidence boosted. Some people, even though they are very, very skilled, some students somehow think that they don't have it in them to do well in a doctoral program. So that's where counseling, encouragement, and all of these things come in. So this is another area where HEIs can work to make sure that there is a supply of good teachers in the future for higher education. Now, after all this is done, and after we've made sure that our institution has been both sensitive to the need to bring in people who are from the socioeconomically deprived groups, to bring them into our institutions, and then we act on it, and we bring as many as possible, at least to the level of the percentages of SC, ST, and other things that the government recommends. But we should try and do even more. Then the next step would be to look at how we nurture them once they come into our classrooms. Now, here is where they can run into a wall of problems. It's one thing to admit students from the socioeconomically deprived groups, but it's another thing entirely to make them feel at home, help them with their skill gaps, and sensitize the institution to make sure that they are treated with respect and dignity, and that they are also that there is the necessary effort and the patience to nurture them, because there are many things that enter the equation here which we need to pay attention to. For one thing, people coming from socioeconomically deprived groups come with issues of self-esteem. Now, this is not surprising, because historically people have, those who belong to the underprivileged classes of our society, because of the caste system, they've internalized the inferiority that has been thrust upon them by the upper castes, across the centuries. And so self-esteem problems, come up and this requires tremendous sensitivity on the part of teachers and peers, the others from upper castes and from higher, better privileged backgrounds. So the entire institutional culture should be oriented towards creating, towards eliminating this us versus them binary, in our institutions. How is it that we can do that? For one, making sure that we overcome stereotypes. You see, one can sometimes hear casual remarks made, which, come sometimes even unconsciously just escape the lips of people, like, oh, that student, you know what background he comes from. Don't expect anything much from him. These people are like that, etc. Now, that is prejudice, certainly, and it can be contagious. Students catch it from teachers who are prejudiced. Those upper caste students who are prejudiced to begin with in the first place can spread it to others, and this deepens the self-esteem issue. It creates barriers again. So institutions must, I think, develop this culture by probably, I don't know how, through workshops, seminars, etc., right at the beginning. And this should be incorporated into the orientation programs right at the beginning, so students know in no uncertain terms that the institution is opposed to bigotry, to prejudice, to caste-based prejudice, and to encourage students from the better privileged backgrounds to see their own role as people who are building a new India, an India of equality, and to get them to see their underprivileged brethren, brothers and sisters coming from underprivileged backgrounds as people who need their support and their help, instead of looking down upon them. This culture has to be built in our institutions. If that's not built, no amount of statistical inclusion of people from the underprivileged backgrounds will make any difference, because you will soon have people dropping out. If a student doesn't feel that he's not getting the extra help he needs because he or she has a skill gap because of coming from poorly educated backgrounds, if the student feels that there is no support, for example, our NEP document talks about bridge courses. Now, these require extra effort on the part of faculty to help students bridge the gap between their low educational quality from the schools and other places they've come from, and the higher standards required in HEIs. So this gap has to be built. And if students find that they don't get that kind of support, and then on top of that, if they find that there is indifference towards them, and worse, there is some kind of condescension, hostility, and they are treated with, they're humiliated in some way or the other, then you will have an increasing rate of dropouts. So this is important to make sure. The other thing, of course, is to ensure employability, which is, what makes them, capable of supporting themselves and their families after they leave institutional higher education. I'll give you one or two small examples. Many of our students find that they cannot even write a simple email, I'm talking from an English teaching background. I think from time to time in our classes, we should have little workshops where skill building becomes the focus, and get them to do things like emails, then courtesy, conversations like learning how to talk to a customer in a polite way, etc. Simulate in the classrooms possible employment scenarios where they're employed, for example, in a BPO or in a public relations job or so on, and see if those skills can be built instead of just preparing them for exams where they just do what is called content recall. They learn some content and they reproduce that in the exam. Instead of just being an exam passing system, how can we build in skill sessions, where you can do it through peer group interaction, where teaching assistants, for example, if you have a PG system, you have PG and UG, then you can get your PG students who are very good, to actually become tutors to small groups of 4 or 5 students in the UG, and they can then help those people with skills. An example I gave was this skill that I just mentioned, telephone etiquette, for example. So if this is monitored, once your PG students who are like teaching assistants in their part time, in their spare time, they will be able to provide this nurture and support to small groups, because nothing works when you have a mass, when you have a crowd. So you split them into small groups and assign a teaching assistant drawn from your PG pool, and then you make sure that works. I'm sorry, there is some construction work going on around, so these laborers are talking to each other loudly outside the building. I hope it's not interfering with you, and that I'm still audible. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. I think I'll close in a short, maybe in a minute or two, and then leave it to you to reflect on this or have any questions.
Maybe there's the opportunity, some questions the audience could answer.
I couldn't hear that.
Yeah, the audience might have some questions.
Yes, I'll stop here. And leave it to you for if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
So there is a question from Dr. Jeevan Kumar. Could you elaborate on the kind of pedagogy required to ensure that the LCDGs inside the classroom are able to catch up with the rest of the class, both in terms of competency building and skill development? They are found wanting. What is the responsibility of the teacher in the classroom to address this problem, which is particularly acute in technical higher education institutions like medical colleges, IITs, IIMs, and in the Indian Institute of Science?
Okay. Can you name the groups that he mentioned?
SEDGs, that is higher education.
Okay.
Like medical colleges, IITs, IIMs, and the Indian Institute of Science.
Yeah, okay. That's a question that is a bit too complex for me to handle from my limited range of expertise. I can only think aloud like a layperson. The classroom space must, basically the classroom space ought to be a space of, it should be a democratic space. It should be a space of equality and social justice. But often it's a very hierarchical space because it's one where power relations are constantly operating. If you have, here's where faculty sensitization to our social problems in this country, faculty sensitization to the issues of inequity, that is the sensitization to the needs of the SEDGs, this must take utmost priority because one of the problems in many of our institutions is prejudice. It is sad but true that very highly educated people, and we have seen this in recent incidents, have acted out of bias and prejudice towards people from the socially deprived classes. This is unforgivable in an educational institution. A teacher, regardless of which caste he or she comes from, must make sure that every student in front of him is treated with dignity. Unfortunately, the experiences of people from the SEDG groups in institutions, especially elite institutions, especially technical institutions like the IITs, has not been, leaves a lot to be desired, to put it mildly. So I think that sensitization must really gather pace if we are to see our classrooms everywhere as spaces where everybody is affirmed regardless of caste, creed, religion, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your expertise on reviving and revamp higher education in India and patiently answering the questions. I'm sure that your wisdom benefited the participants. I take the opportunity to put all my gratitude into words. On behalf of St. Vincent Pallotti College and the teaching fraternity, I thank our resource person, Dr. Cherian Alexander, for taking his precious time out and consenting to be the resource person. So, indeed, your words have inspired all of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Shall I leave? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Okay. All the best for the rest of the sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. True education comes from a passion for learning. Dear participants, we are heading now to session 2 on inclusiveness and diversity in curriculum designing and development. I extend a hearty welcome to Dr. Suma Singh, Dean of Arts, Mount Carmel College, Autonomous, Bangalore. Thank you, dear ma'am, for accepting the invitation and gracing us virtually. Now, I request Ms. Kirti, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, to introduce the resource person. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. A very good morning. It is a great honor for me to introduce the resource person of the day, Dr. Suma Singh, Dean of Humanities, Mount Carmel College. She has over 25 years of rich academic experience. She has served primarily in Mount Carmel College, along with Sri Bhagwan Mahavir Jain College, Taskmark, and also at Bengaluru University. She has also been a guest faculty, student exchange program of Global College, Long Island University, New York. Ma'am's areas of expertise are economic policy and political economy. She is also guiding 5 PhD students. Apart from her academic record, she also has served as KAS officer for Government of Karnataka. She is also a co-founder of Applied Policy of Research. We are glad to invite you, ma'am. I request you to take over the section.
Thank you, Ms. Beena. Thank you, Dr. Jerome, for this invite. Navita, can I share my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Navita, can you just help me out, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not able to. One sec.
Just click on the present option. Present now. Below.
Allow?
Yes, ma'am. In the below, okay, you have a present option next to next to the video. Okay.
You're not allowed. Okay, I'll just check.
Present now. Click on the present now.
I'm not able to get that, Navita. So sorry.
Ma'am, on your screen below, there is an arrow pointing. Just click on that arrow. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
You click on that arrow, and it will tell you which screen to share.
Okay. So what screen do I choose?
Is it a PPT?
It's a PPT, yes.
Yeah, you can select that, ma'am. It will show your entire screen, a window, or a tab. So 3 options. You can select a tab and then select the PPT.
Oh, I have to keep. I'm so sorry. Just give me a minute. One.
No problem.
Even I zoomed it everything. She's.
Navita, I am not sure if the screen is visible.
It is not visible.
Not visible.
Now?
Yes, ma'am. You can click on the slideshow now.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. Inclusivity and diversity in curriculum designing and development. When Sir told me about this, I actually had to think a lot, because I think NEP document is something that most of us are familiar with, and the curriculum process is still in the way. So I thought, let me just put together whatever has been our experience at Mounts in the last few months, and whatever I could take from the NEP policy document itself. For most of us who are in the space of education, we do realize that education is a great leveler and is probably the best tool for achieving economic and social mobility, inclusion, and equality. This is exactly what the spirit of the NEP 2020 is also about, whether it's in terms of the school education or the higher education. The emphasis has been on the fact that education can be a game changer, and we need to capitalize on that. This is something which most of you would be familiar with. If you look at the document speaks in detail about the pillars of NEP, which is again a reflection of the spirit of NEP, which needs to get imbibed in curriculum designing and development. Affordability, accessibility, quality, equity, and accountability. I think we have to keep all these pillars in mind even when we are drafting our curriculums. So what exactly are we looking at in the NEP document which makes the curriculum drafting a challenge? I think today we all agree we are living in a knowledge economy, and the economy is creating job opportunities which require a new set of skills. The good old days of just getting a graduate degree of any sort and taking up a job and lasting there for 30 odd years is gone, because the market requires us to keep upgrading our skills. That is what a knowledge economy is symbolic of. And this means that we are moving towards a period of lifelong learning. And this is what has to be primarily kept in mind in the context of NEP when we are drafting our curriculum. What exactly does NEP talk about? Why is it that we all seem to be talking about how NEP is going to change the entire landscape of higher education in India? I think from a system which was largely oriented towards the teachers, a lot depended on the way we wanted to frame our curriculum, the way we wanted to conduct our classes, the way we wanted to have assessments. We are now going to be moving towards a more student-centric method of education system. We're also talking about the much hyped multidisciplinary holistic education, about which I'll talk later on. And finally, there seems to have been an acknowledgement that there is a need for real learning to happen. Real skill sets which the students need in their actual life, on the real life and in the workspace is what the policy emphasizes on. So we need to keep in mind while drafting our curriculum and even delivering it, that emphasis should be on conceptual learning, creativity and critical thinking, which unfortunately our system has killed in the last few decades. The policy document also emphasizes a great deal about going back into our history and tradition, and also building a sense of pride in our own languages and all that. So that is again something which the curriculum designer will have to keep in mind. And it goes without emphasis. We have to talk about ethics, because you cannot build a society without an ethical young population out there, and the human and constitutional values, which are very symbolic of what we are as a nation. So what exactly is the holistic and the multidisciplinary education that the NEP talks about? The NEP is very clear in the fact that all the undergrad programs are going to be based on the multidisciplinary education model. So here we are now looking at breaking the watertight compartments that we are so comfortably used to all these decades. So are we heading towards a scenario where the traditional degrees in the form of a BA, BSc, BCom will be done away with, because students are going to be exposed to a set of knowledge or education across the board. Students will have to take up papers from literature, music, statistics, sociology, economics, sports. You could take anything to get your degree today. That could be a student coming from a science background, commerce background, or a humanities background. And most important, when you're looking at building the society of the next year, of the coming years, we're also realizing the fact that students need to be told that there is a need for them to engage with the community. And that's why the concept of community development and service, engaging in community activities, is integral to the model of the curriculum now, because that is also going to fetch the credits to the student community. Again, it's a need of the hour. We're talking about environmental education, which is also going to be a major component in curriculum design. I wouldn't want to go into detail about the 3 or 4 year degree program. That is something most of you are aware of. But there is a multiple entry and exit option, which of course will be thrown open to debate, I'm presuming, in the coming years. We also are looking at how there is a need for us to build on the research ability of our students. So we are going to be heading towards degree programs which will have the research component in the 4th year. The criteria laid down is a 7.5 CGPA score to get into this particular research 4th year, which I think is going to pave way for more students who are inclined to research and who have the aptitude for it. Hopefully will get into the research stream, because the 4-year degree with research will automatically make them eligible for the PhD. How exactly is the entire curriculum design going to be different is also reflected in the fact that we are looking at engaging students in different other spheres also, whether it's in the incubation cell, the technology development centers, which your campuses have to host now, the research centers, what kind of an industry academic linkages are you going to build up, and most important, even when we talk about research, whether it's undertaken by the faculty or the students, the emphasis is on interdisciplinary research. So this is exactly what the NEP means when it talks about the holistic and multidisciplinary education. So I think the crux of the thing is we are doing away with the watertight compartmentalization that we had. We are moving towards probably what is a true cafeteria system that you will see in the Western societies. Is it for the good or not? I leave it to you. So what is it that we are expecting when we are drafting curriculum under NEP? The document is very clear. The first thing that you will have to keep in mind when you're drafting your curriculum is the graduate attributes or the program outcomes. The UGC, of course, has released the documents regarding the higher education qualification framework and the skill sets. Maybe you all need to go through it when you're getting into the process of curriculum designing, because every graduate program now will have to clearly state what is the skills and competencies that the graduate is going to acquire at the end of every year, which will of course lead to the employability of the graduates. Whatever program we are designing, we should be focusing on key areas of critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, and collaboration. This, I think, is extremely important because when you talk to people, whether it's your placement cell or industry stakeholders, they always come back to you and tell you that it is not the marks which finally matters, what the student has got. It is really these skill sets of problem solving, teamwork, which makes a huge difference. This has to become integral into your curriculum. So your graduate attributes or your program outcomes have to focus on these key factors. The multiple entry and exit makes it inevitable that we should be very clear with the competencies that the student will acquire at the end of every exit option. This is something we have to keep in mind when we are drafting the curriculum, because remember, the student has an option of leaving at the end of the first year with a certificate or a second year with a diploma. So when a student enters into a market with a certificate or a diploma, what are the competencies or the skill set that the student has to be very clearly stated. There is a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary learning experience which comes in, because your curriculum is now going to go beyond your core discipline papers. I'm sure all of you are a part of the NEP implementation in Karnataka, so you would be very familiar with the fact that we have the open electives which have come in. We also have the skill-based courses which have come in, which is where the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach is being spoken of. But I think there is a need to go much more deeper into this. The content, whatever you're building or whatever you're getting into your curriculum, must be relevant to the outcomes. Because remember, we're starting with the graduate attributes or program outcomes. So the content that I have in my syllabus must be matched with that PO or graduate attributes. Again, very typical of the Indian education sector, we know we are producing graduates who are largely who are just having paper degrees, right? I mean, what is the skill sets that they are having? So when drafting the curriculum, we need to focus on the skills. Let's do away with the traditional way of looking at delivery and assessment of the students. We need to bring in more of exposure in the form of experiential learning. This could be visit to the labs, the field works, industry interaction, projects that are being undertaken. Maybe we could give greater weightage for all this. Of course, criteria need to be worked out for all this. The pedagogy of teaching, we at Mounts have always been speaking about NEP actually can be successful only if the pedagogy of teaching is going to undergo a change. We need to break free of the traditional talk method. We need to look at bringing in active learning techniques, project-based learning, which surprisingly a lot of schools seem to be doing extremely well. Technology-based learning, these are things that we have to make a transition to. And of course, assessment. I'm not a great, believer in the end semester exams. I think the NEP is right when it says do away with the rote system of learning and look at continuous assessment, because that is what students need at the end of the day, and that is what really contributes to the attainment of the skills. So when you're drafting the curriculum, these are the expectations that you will have to keep in mind. But how do I ensure inclusivity and diversity? Or how does the NEP document by itself ensure inclusivity and diversity, whether it's in curriculum or the teaching learning process? I think the academic credit bank is something which has been spoken about a lot, which is what makes the document to a large extent student-centric, which gives them the entry and exit option. And this is what makes learning a lifelong process, which is what is one of the starting points of the document, where they want to ensure everybody who has probably at some stage, due to personal reasons or whatever other reasons, been unable to complete their degree programs, now gets an opportunity to go back and complete it at any stage. That I think is very interesting, and that is very important if you're talking of inclusive education, more so coming from a girls' college like ours. I'm sure most of you would appreciate a lot of girl students normally tend to drop out for personal reasons. But this concept of the ACB is very important for them, and that would ensure that they're able to complete their education at any point in their life. The other key factor for me, I think, when we talk about inclusivity in the NEP is the fact that a student today has the option of merging the online and regular mode. Of course, modalities of these have to be worked out, and it might take a couple of months or years for this. But again, this is something which is very student-centric, because today a student is binded by the fact that they have to come to the offline regular mode classes. They have to get all their credits from the campus teaching learning that happens. But now, with the fact that 40% of it can be picked up from the online mode, that again makes it very exciting for the student community, and of course for colleges like ours, which probably will be given the permission to have online degrees. The other important thing is, again, this is a very American way of looking at it, is the fact that the student needs to focus on getting credits. Now, where are you getting your credits from? If at all it's a full cafeteria method, the student can get credits from across any courses. It could be from any stream. And what he needs or she needs is the minimum number of credits which are needed to get their degrees. To continue further, this is again something very ambitious. I'm not really sure how soon or how late this will happen. The fact that we want to do away with the current system that we have of a BA, BSc, BCom, and convert all our undergraduate programs into Bachelor of Liberal Arts, which is where that interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary element is going to come in. So I could be a student who enrolls for environment science, but I could still go and pick up credits from, say, for example, economics department, or I could go and pick up some credits from the business management department. And that is what makes it truly a liberal arts program, which I think is important, because for students from our whatever little experience we've had, we've realized that students need to be well versed across board, across subjects. That whole thing of I'm a commerce graduate and this is what I'm going to study and get into the market is not going to work, because there is a need. Your job market requires skill sets which are beyond your textbook knowledge, and that is where the concept or an idea of Bachelor of Liberal Arts works well. As I already told you, it is an interdisciplinary structure that you will have to come up in your curriculum. The student has an option of taking any subject combination. Of course, it might take a couple of years to happen, but that's what the document talks about. The other thing which is going to become integral into your curriculum, which is again a reflection of our inclusivity and diversity of India as a nation, is the fact that we probably will have greater emphasis on courses which are going to be promoting traditional arts, the culture of the country, awareness of ancient knowledge systems. For example, the way they have integrated yoga into the curriculum in the Karnataka matrix is a reflection of this particular objective that the NEP has when you look at the broader curriculum framework. But I think what is more interesting for me is the fact that the NEP talks about bringing in vocational education into general education. For all of us in the sphere of academics with little or more experience, we do realize that our students are not having the sufficient number of skills that are needed when they enter the market. I think vocationalizing general education is going to be very important. This is again, for me, this could be a step towards inclusivity, because this is what is going to enhance their opportunities of job employment in the market. Now, just to give you an idea, if you're familiar with the program matrix released by the Karnataka State Higher Education Council, almost all our degree programs today, I'm talking of the general degree program, will have a vocational course which is being brought in the 5th and 6th semester. That is very interesting. And also the document talks about how a student from a general program can go ahead and take up a BVOC or a vocational degree program and take more credits from that and complete a degree. So that, I think, is going to give the students a greater freedom, because the students need to know, maybe the first year they're not aware, but by the second and third year, the student will have a fair idea what are the kind of skills that I would need for the dream job that I'm working towards. As a country, we are so obsessed with the traditional way of teaching, learning, the traditional way of structuring curriculum, that we overlook the fact that the students' learning really happens in other spaces. It could be in terms of the sports activities, the community engagements that the student is engaged in, NSS, NCC, the cultural activities. The very fact that the document is giving credit to all these now is something which we need to welcome. I do hope that higher educational institutions are able to structure all these activities very carefully, because students who have those kind of abilities need to be awarded the skills, and those need to be awarded the credits, and those credits would enable them to get their degrees. The other thing which is very, very important when we talk about inclusivity and diversity in curriculum, the government did start off this with the engineering colleges this year, is about offering degree courses in Indian languages and bilingually. It has not been very successful in the engineering colleges, but we'll have to wait and watch to see how this is going to pan out, because in a country like ours, English English education, let me say, is very aspirational, and it's also looked as a means of social and economic mobility. So how popular will be degree programs which are going to be taught in Indian languages, we'll have to wait and watch. But definitely the NEP emphasizes a great deal about using the mother tongue and going back to your own language, because it's believed and proved that learning is much student friendly when you're using their own mother tongues. For me, the curriculum inclusivity and diversity also comes from a teacher's point of view, because I, as a teacher now, will have the freedom to design my curriculum and use different pedagogy in my classrooms. That again is important when we are talking about diversity, because I think unfortunately in the rigid system that we have today, there is a great deal of homogeneity when it comes to how a teacher is doing a curriculum and how a teacher is delivering it in the classroom. But the NEP speaks of giving that freedom to the faculty. Again, this is something that we'll have to wait and see how it's going to come out in the coming years. The next thing for me, which is very important, again from the point of view of inclusivity and diversity, is the fact that the document says we will make a transition from the high-stakes examination towards a more continuous and comprehensive evaluation. This is definitely the need of the hour. I don't think so students can be assessed based on a 2-hour or a 3-hour examination at the end of a semester. This is not the way real learning happens. If at all we are able to make a successful transition to this, that would be a big, big step in inclusivity and diversity in curriculum for me. Because here we are going to be assessing students for their real abilities and the kind of skills that they will be picking up over the course of a semester or over the course of a particular program. I really didn't have much from the document to pick up when I was looking into it in terms of inclusivity and diversity in curriculum, because the term inclusivity has been widely used in the document, but it has also been used in terms of student support and across the governance and other areas. But when my thing was restricted to the curriculum, I also was wondering, let's have a reality check. Are we as faculty ready to break free from the watertight compartmentalization of our education system? I really doubt, because I think most of us are not willing to go beyond our comfort zone. Most of us would still like to ensure that our workloads are well preserved. This, I think, is something which got reflected in the matrix which the council released in Karnataka. Because if you're really looking at inclusivity, diversity, multidisciplinary education system, we have to think beyond our subjects. We have to think from a broader perspective and from a perspective of the student community. Even if we as faculty are ready for this experiment, are we going to be trained? Because we need to be trained in terms of the curriculum that we are designing. I have to tell this, the curriculum that got designed in our state was just a rehash of what we had earlier, right? So where is the NEP spirit getting reflected in the curriculum that we are now following for the first batch under NEP? If at all we have to really get into that interdisciplinary liberal arts system, the faculty mindsets have to change. The faculty needs to be trained. Our educational institutions, is the government willing to invest in the training of faculty? That is something we'll have to have a reality check on. Also, other regulatory bodies acknowledging the need to deregulate the system. Because, when the NEP got implemented, we were so excited thinking that we have an opportunity to experiment a great deal, whether it's in terms of the syllabus or whether it's in terms of our assessment too. But at the end of the day, we did not get any freedom because you had the regulatory body which told us this is the matrix, this is the credit, this is how you're going to assess your students. And it seemed to be just like old wine in a new bottle. And if you're going to go ahead with this regulatory bodies continuing to be the most important thing in the higher education space, the NEP document is not going to be successful in terms of its real implementation. The success of inclusive, diverse, multidisciplinary curriculum largely would depend upon how are educational institutions going to reach out to their stakeholders. This could be the industry stakeholder, it could be the alumni stakeholder, because we need all of them on board. Although we would love to believe that we are bridging the gap, there is much more distance to be traveled. So are these are we going to take the right step in terms of building these linkages? These are some things which I'm really not sure. So for me, it is the document per se is exciting in the sense that it probably throws open opportunities for students to pick and choose as per their choice, as per their interest. The document is exciting because you're talking of a liberal arts format where the student can actually pick up courses which enhance their skills and which are very important in the real world. But in terms of the reality check, we also need to acknowledge that the change has to begin from the faculty, from the regulatory bodies, and from the management of higher educational institutions. So I'm a bit pessimist when it comes to the actual implementation of NEP in its true spirit. That's it. So if you have any questions, I'll be open to it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was a very wonderful presentation. Do we have any questions?
Navita, I could just share our experience at Mount Carmel College because the topic seemed to be on inclusivity and diversity, and the fact that the NEP talks about interdisciplinary method or interdisciplinary curriculum. For us, what was really exciting was the concept of an open elective, because I think that gave a flavor of the interdisciplinary curriculum which the NEP talks about. So the first semester in my college, we nearly had around 37 open electives that got floated. That I think was very interesting because you had students coming, for example, from a science and commerce background who did a paper on, historical perspectives of Indian cinema, for example. Or a student from arts going and doing a paper on graphic designing. That kind of a multidisciplinary approach which the open elective brought in was something which was really exciting. But we need to build on that probably a bit more because a lot of departments just rehashed some of their regular papers and offered it as open electives. Maybe as we progress, we are going to be much more creative in terms of structuring the open electives, because the open elective is one area which really gives you that multidisciplinary touch.
There's one question. The model curriculum prescribed by the Karnataka State Higher Education Council for all subject goes against the spirit of NEP 2020.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And Navita, that is why I told you at the end of the day, it was an old wine in a new bottle. Because the excitement was built up in terms of the fact that the curriculum could be something which is very different, but it did not happen. And also, for me, the starting point which went wrong is we did not specify the skill sets or the competencies at the end of every year which the student will get to be awarded the certificate or the diploma. That required a greater deal of deliberation. Maybe because of the time constraint, it did not happen. But I think that is something which the council will have to go back, because there is need for a greater clarity with regard to the graduate attributes and program outcomes and the competencies which the student is going to get at the end of every year. Anything else, Navika? Navita, sorry?
Yes, yes.
Why she's turning off her video? We don't turn off your video. Keep it on. Not throughout.
Thank you, ma'am, for sharing your wisdom on changes in higher education landscape in multidisciplinary education and patiently answering all the questions.
Welcome, Navita. Thank you for this opportunity and all the best to each one of you, because I think whether we actually bring inclusivity and diversity, whether it's in terms of curriculum, whether it's in terms of teaching, learning, whether it's in terms of management and governance of an institution, a lot depends on the faculty. So all the best to all of you. Thank you.
Gratitude is a sign of noble souls. On behalf of St. Vincent Pallotti College, I thank our resource person, Dr. Suma Singh, Dean of Arts, for taking precious time out and consenting to be the resource person. Ma'am, indeed, your words have inspired all of us. Dear participants, we will take a short break and resume by 11:55 a.m.
Father, should we have to end the live stream or keep continuing? Hello, can you hear me? So I was asking, since we have taken a break, should we end the live or just continue? Okay. Then so can you share the other one? Other phone, yeah. Okay.
Should we play this the college video instead?
ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊಸಕೋಟೆ ಆಫೀಸ್ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಹೋಗಿಲ್ಲ ಹೊಸಕೋಟೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಚೆಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಇಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇಸ್ಕೊಂಡಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಸರ್ ಫೋನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಸರ್ ತೆಗಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅಂದ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಂತ ಹೋಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ
So I've got my essay written, and I've been working on it for about a week. So now I'm going to show you how I use Grammarly to edit.
Hi, people. I'm Pinky Thomas, and my son studies in Vincent Pallotti in first PUC, the science stream. And as a parent, I'm extremely happy about the things that are being happening over here. Academically, and the sports and the co-curricular activities are really amazing. As well as I thank the teaching faculty members who really do a wonderful job in training the students. And the things that is we are being updated to whatever is happening in the school, especially in this college regarding the attendance, which is being every day informed to the parents. That's really wonderful. As well as I could see a lot of personal touch in the teachers where they take care of the children very personally and guide them and help us also to know how our child should grow and where we should motivate and guide them. I thank the management for helping our children grow better. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sujata Sudhakar. I joined my daughter here in the college, Vincent Pallotti. The campus, we have a very huge campus, and the classrooms, the infrastructures are very good. They give importance to extracurricular activities. They have NSS, NCC, and other curricular activities. And they have remedy classes for dull students. And they have seminar halls, canteens, and it's very good.
My name is R.K. Mohan. My son is studying in the second PUC in this college. This college atmosphere and staff is very good here.
I'm John Bosco, father of Sanat Bosco, who is studying second year PUC in this college. And the college got the admission in this college because it is run by a Christian institution, and it has got a big auditorium and a very big class halls, and also very good ventilation, lighting. And apart from this, they have a very good big ground also for the students to play. So that is the reason I have opted for this college for my son.
I'm Kala Suresh, and my daughter is studying in first PUC. And I would like to thank the management of Vincent Pallotti College. Especially I see the kindness of the teachers and the management, and especially when I came first year, I was a little bit nervous. But when I met the principal and the management, I felt so comfortable and I felt so good about it. So I really want to thank all the teachers. And even after when my daughter joined, she felt very happy to do her studies, and she feels comfortable and happy. And I'm really thankful to the principal and the teachers and all the management.
Do you ever feel like you're being watched? You are. The browser you're using is a
as the saying goes, trophy gathers dust, whereas the memory stays for lifetime. So our sports students are taking part.
Prince in our sports culture, established across streams. Pelosi platforms has built a lot of district players and state level champions. We strive best in bringing up the talents and shall provide all amenities for the betterment of students' flourishment. Thank you.
Myself, Merlin, from 5th Sem BCom. I'm studying in St. Vincent Pallotti College. Sports day is going on in our college. I had many chances to participate in many events. As this is my final year, I have participated. One of them was a relay and won first place also in relay. It was a great experience with sports captain, teachers, fathers. Everyone encouraged us to participate in many events. And this college gave us many opportunity like kabaddi, throw ball, volleyball, everything. And it was a very great experience in this. I feel proud to be in this college.
I'm very proud and privileged to be in the family of Pallotites. And these days, as we are having annual sports, a lot of enthusiasm is created among our students. St. Vincent Pallotti College provides not only academic excellency, but also platform to physical and mental skill development of the students. To facilitate their skill, you see here a well-furnished basketball court, topped with greenery, a football court, an ideal size of cricket ground, throw ball, volleyball, badminton, etc. And a lot of space for spectators to cheer the players and many more. I thank you and wish you all the best.
I'm Aishwarya, studying at Vincent Pallotti College, and I have participated in Kabaddi, which was an awesome game, and we learned many things out of it. And I know Kabaddi is not so easy in playing, but it was a fun time playing that. I thank my director, principal for giving us
A very warm welcome to all the participants and Dr. Arul Mani. So let's begin with our technical session 3 on cultural and ethical considerations in NEP 2020. I extend a hearty welcome to Dr. Arul Mani, Dean of Languages, St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Bangalore. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and gracing us virtually. I request Ms. Roslyn, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science, to introduce the resource person to us.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Very good morning to everyone present here. It's a great honor for me to introduce the resource person of the day, Dr. Arul Mani, Dean of Languages at St. Joseph's College Autonomous, Bangalore. He has been actively involved in syllabus and curriculum redesign, examination reform, teacher mentoring, and experience design. He has a PhD in Latin American fiction
and has been served on the boards of studies of several autonomous colleges and is also the member of Research Advisory Committee of Presidency University. He has written for the Asian Age, Midday Mumbai, Deccan Chronicle, Deccan Herald, and India Today, in addition to being a commissioned writer, commentator, and reviewer of books for Scroll, Caravan, Heralka, Outlook Traveler, and Time Out magazine. He has also been on the research team for the television shows Mastermind India and University Challenge and is an active promoter of quizzing and information culture. We are pleased to have you a presence with us, sir. So we are looking forward to an informative session from you. Over to you, sir.
Good morning. I hope I am audible. Thank you.
Yes,
thank you, organizers, for giving me this opportunity to join you in conversation today about the cultural and ethical considerations arising from the NEP 2020. I'm a person with some reservations about the NEP 2020, but I also approach it in a spirit of realism, given the fact that we are in Karnataka and Karnataka has chosen to be the first state to implement the NEP. Right? I hold thus that the situation presents certain challenges, certain problematic issues as well that need further thinking about. The challenges offer us opportunities for creative response, and I think those must be seized as well. So in a very quick sort of nutshell, that is really going to be the burden of my discussion today. Now, if we are talking about cultural and ethical considerations, right, it's first important to make certain crucial distinctions. And I'm going to spend some time trying to articulate those distinctions. Let me just try and organize my presentation and try to get it shared with you guys. Just give me a moment. All right, I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Super, super. Right. All right. So, I said some distinctions are essential, and I'll take you over those distinctions very quickly, and then we'll get to the crucial issues that I would like to open up with you. Right? The first of the issues that I want to talk about, right, is the fact that the distinctions are important, right? There is the NEP 2020, which is the proposal that was ratified and passed in the parliament and has become a fact of life, right? And we have to make a distinction between that document and the fact that Karnataka has chosen to implement it, right? Now, these two things are not to be assumed as identical, right? They are slightly different. There are important differences, important distinctions between these two documents, between the NEP 2020 and the reading of the NEP 2020 that has been provided in Karnataka by the Karnataka State Higher Education Council. So that distinction is one we must be mindful of because it allows us to see the cultural and ethical considerations more clearly. Right? Now, when the NEP 2020 came out, right, one of the things that it did, right, was raise what it saw as the key problems faced by the higher education system in India. Right? And these are not things that are unfamiliar to us. These are not things that are new to us, right? But it's definitely possible to open a conversation in terms of on what basis these are identified as problems, right? Is fragmentation a problem if it means that diversities are being addressed, right? Also, another such issue that one can pick with this list is why are some of the problems behind the problems not addressed? So if you look at if you look at B on the list, less emphasis on the development of cognitive skills and learning outcomes, or a rigid separation of disciplines, or limited access, or E, limited teacher and institutional autonomy, and so on, right? The larger problem that could have been raised here is the problem of over-centralization. So an analysis of how much of the ills that plague education in India arise from over-centralization, right, would have been a good discussion to have. But the NEP document, for some reason, does not really go near that issue in any substantial form. Right? It's a criticism that was made as soon as the document came out, and the subsidiary question that it raises, right, which is decentralization a good response? What form must that decentralization take? What contradictions can it result in? What contradictions do we have to make our peace with? Right? Those conversations, unfortunately, did not happen. Right? And so what we have is an identification of problems. And at some point in the public debate that followed, my good friend and cultural commentator, Professor V.S. Sridhara of Vijaya College, formerly of Vijaya College, pointed out that the problems were identified in a certain manner without much conversation. And then, very surprisingly, a list of solutions, right, or a set of goals were identified, and there didn't seem to be too much of a match or correspondence between the problems identified and the solutions offered. Right? And so there are certain contradictions, right, that are there in the nature of the NEP and how it has been phrased and formulated and offered. Right? So, as I was saying when I began, we are now in a situation where the NEP is a fact of life. The natural question to ask is, what is the point of looking at this now? Right? But my contention would be that it's important to look at these now to understand the everyday difficulties and problems that people in undergraduate education are going to face, right? And if you have clarity about where some of the problems are coming from, it becomes possible to devise solutions, to devise workarounds, and to come up with creative ways of dealing with these problems at our level. So you can see that I come with a certain kind of optimism, with a certain faith in the ability of ordinary people, teachers like yourself and myself, to come up with sensible solutions when there has been a failure of imagination in policy making, in policy framing, etc. Right? to continue with the process of making the distinction, right, I would like to also remind you that we are all now familiar with the NEP Karnataka, right, which is a kind of avatar of the NEP 2020, not exactly the same thing. One way of talking about NEP Karnataka is to call it an interpretation, right? So the NEP 2020 is a text, and what you have in practice is an interpretation that a body of experts have provided. One of the first criticisms made about NEP Karnataka has been that a good deal of the early planning and work that happened, right, around implementing NEP did not involve undergraduate teachers, right? And so what you had were high-power committees with experts whose expertise we are not going to question, right? But whose distance from undergraduate education has resulted in certain avoidable complications, right? Looking back on the last year, right, I think it would have been important to have a consultation featuring universities, autonomous colleges, affiliated colleges across the board, faculty by faculty, right? A good, careful, leisurely conversation would have resulted in a much more sensitive local implementation. That is the other distinction that that is something arising out of the distinction that I'm making between NEP 2020 and NEP Karnataka. Right? What I would also like to point out is that the NEP 2020 conversation is not over entirely. NEP 2020 is a document, right? But that document mandates certain processes, such as, for instance, the rise of 4 verticals in charge of different aspects of higher education, right? Such as the HECI, Higher Education Commission, right? The NHEQF, the National Higher Education Qualifications Framework. Now, very recently, the UGC put out in the month of February the NHEQF, the National Higher Education Qualifications Framework, right? And if you read that document, right, further distinctions arise because the NHEQF, right, makes certain things that are ambiguous or not clear in the NEP 2020 a lot clearer, right? The NHEQF also calls into question certain interpretations that have been made while NEP Karnataka was put into action, right? So it's important. I don't know if how many of you were able to catch the UGC notification and read the NHEQF document that was shared for public discussion. About 2 to 2.5 weeks was given for a public discussion. Just to fill you in case you didn't follow that specific set of developments, the NHEQF or Qualifications Framework is part of India's attempt at bringing some kind of international recognition to the framework of qualifications that we have in India today, right? So there are national qualification frameworks that many countries have taken up, but one of the key players in this regard is the European Union, which has its own... Are you able to hear me? Sorry, is there a problem?
No, sir. It's fine.
No, okay.
You're audible, sir.
Right, thank you. Now, the European Union has a very interesting qualifications framework, right? Set up as a regional framework, which individual member nations of the European Union can produce variations on, right? So the regional qualifications framework tries to accommodate different needs and different approaches and so on. And so what India is trying to do is enter a zone of recognitions right, by which our qualifications are recognized internationally, paving the way, hopefully, for greater mobility for our students in terms of seeking international qualifications, but also at a later date for international recognition for our qualifications leading to employment opportunities. So that's the direction in which NHEQF seems to be going, right? NHEQF is also tied in some sense to the skills framework, the national skills framework. So that conversation has now begun, right? But I'll just take you over some of the things I noticed while reading the NHEQF document, right? Here is one of the interesting things that NHEQF says. The parts that I have put in bold, I want to emphasize, right? It's interesting for us sitting in Karnataka because one of the things it says clearly, I've called it remembering doctors because, if you visited a doctor, sometimes you visited a doctor and you've come away with relief. Sometimes you visited a doctor and the doctor has said, this won't hurt very much, and then it has hurt quite a lot, right? So it's an ambiguous experience. With that ambiguity, we go into this opening statement, which is important because it says NHEQF is not intended to promote a uniform curriculum or a national common syllabus, right? Or so it's not a syllabus making program. It's not a teaching learning approaches. It doesn't prescribe or proscribe particular approaches to teaching learning, and it does not seek to directly control examinations and assessment, right? Instead, what it uses is the language of benchmarking, right? And it says that the benchmarking is supposed to happen in the realm of design and development of syllabi and programs, teaching learning, and the assessment, right? So it's flexibility and innovation rather than a straitjacket, rather than a common code or a common national way of doing things that the NHEQF is talking about. Now, if you read carefully the documents available for NEP Karnataka, right? One of the things we were told in meetings and in discussions is that it's very important that all universities are on the same page in terms of the syllabi for the first 4 semesters so as to allow multiple entry and exit and the academic bank of credits to function efficiently, right? But if you read the NHEQF, you can see that the NHEQF does not ask for any such thing. Okay, so the appearance of this document immediately sets the cat among the pigeons, in the sense that colleges will now have to go back to the authorities in Karnataka, to the KSHEC, and ask them to clarify whether all the announcements and impositions that happened after NEP was implemented were really necessary, right? So for autonomous colleges, this becomes a key issue of contention, right? But it's equally important for affiliated colleges because one of the other things that the NHEQF very clearly formulates, it sets up 7 levels of qualification, and the relevant levels of qualification for higher education are levels 7, 8, 9, and 10. Level 7 pertains to the basic degree, 8 to the honors degree, 9 to postgraduate qualifications, and 10 to doctoral degrees. I'll just walk you through some of the key points very quickly, just to bring us back to the fact that distinctions that are arising right now are very important. We have to pay attention. But one of the most interesting things that I found in the NHEQF is that it caps the credits that the student has to work at to 20 credits per semester, right? you don't have to do more than 20 credits. Now that immediately results in further conversation in Karnataka with regard to NEP, because depending upon the model that you have chosen to implement, whether it's 2A or 2B or 3B or 3C, right? There are various models that were suggested. Many of these models tend to impose upon the student a credit burden of 23 to 27 credits. Right? So there's a mismatch somewhere that has to be corrected. Right? So paying attention to the details of the NEP conversation is very important. It's a task of vigilance that I think all of us need to invest in at the very least. I'll very quickly take you through the other things as well. Just give me a second. Now, for instance, look at level 8, which is the honors degree / PG diploma, basically the 4th year of the degree, right? Now, the 4th year, they bring in 2 bits of fine print, which I want to share with you. So let's say you've taken up the NEP degree last year in Karnataka. You do 3 years according to the plan, and the 4th year, if you do the 4th year, right, it's supposed to allow you to do either 1 year of PG or go straight into PhD. That's what we were told. Now look at the fine print that is there in the NEP, right? So if you're going for the 4th year of the bachelor's degree, which is honors / research, these are the entry requirements. One of the things that the NHEQF asks for is a minimum CGPA of 7.5 after 3 years. Only then can you do the 4th year, right? So the multiple entry exit suddenly seems very truncated here, right? The other interesting thing, right, is the idea of lateral entry, right? Because here they say the individual can have done a bachelor's degree, but these can include outcomes outside of formal learning or through learning and training in the workplace or through continuing professional development activities, right? So it doesn't have to be through an exam, right? You can come and finish the 4th year. Let's say if you have been an entrepreneur and need a degree, right? If you can prove that the skills in the degree you have learned through professional activity, you're allowed to come in and do the 4th year. What are the implications of that? Right? So some of the things, like I was saying, that are not fully clear in the NEP seem to get clarified by the NHEQF. So this is at the level of the 4th year. But again, there are questions here, right? Because if you're saying minimum CGPA of 7.5, who does that exclude? What happens to students from rural backgrounds? What happens to students who may not have the support system to achieve a CGPA like this? That question is not answered, and it's going to be a big sticking point with the NHEQF. They also talk about the PG diploma, right? And this PG diploma is interesting because it says if you leave the MA program after the 1st year, right? Provided you do an exit 10 credit bridge course with internships that help you get employment, you will get a diploma certificate, right? So there is a diploma if you leave at the end of the 2nd year of degree. That's an undergraduate diploma. But if you finish your degree, start a master's, you finished a basic degree of 3 years, you do a 1 year of the master's, and then you leave, right? If you do the bridge course and do internships, you will be given a PG diploma, right? Which possibly can then be completed later, can be furthered later by the student doing the next 2 semesters as well to get the PG qualification. Similarly, with the doctoral degree, right, one interesting thing that the NEP opens up is that apart from the regular requirements of coursework and thesis, they also open up the possibility of creative work, right? So there are many interesting things like this in the NHEQF and also many things that raise questions, right? All of which illustrates the basic point that I'm making, which is that these documents require us to do very, very careful reading because they're not exactly matching with each other. There are areas of clarity and areas of ambiguity, both of which emerge from the fact that there are now 3 documents in play. This becomes all the more interesting when you realize that the NHEQF is just one of the many verticals that are supposed to arise in the field of higher education. There will be 3 more that are going to take form over the next year or so, right? So all of us in education will now have to do some very careful reading of what is emerging between these documents in order to understand the ramifications of the full implementation of NEP 2020. The last thing I would like to do as part of my introductory comments, right, is refer you to the Prabhat Patnaik Committee's report. So when the NEP 2020 was announced, the left front government in Kerala appointed a committee under the senior academic Prabhat Patnaik. There were other eminent scholars on the committee like Rajan Gurukal, right, and other, not just from Kerala, from across India. There was a six-member committee that went into the NEP, right? Please do read that committee's report. It's available on the internet, right? You can easily find it. They offer a very careful reading of NEP 2020, right? And they look carefully at some of the highlights that have been the subject of discussion in terms of the NEP. Now, the Press Information Bureau released a 34-number list pertaining to the key features of the NEP. What I've put in here in this slide are about 20 that are directly relevant to undergraduate and postgraduate education, right? Some of these are interesting ideas, right? But some of these are also things that raise questions, right? Now, for instance, this emphasis on teacher education is a long overdue decision, but one of the things that arises as a question in Karnataka is simply this. On what basis was our 3 major system dismantled? What was the research that allowed its dismantling, right? From the point of view of teacher education, there is nothing as ideal as the 3 major BSc or the 3 major BA, right? Because it means that these are teachers who can go in, if they become teachers, these graduates are people who can go in and plug many gaps in the field of secondary education and primary education, right? Similarly, when they talk of the National Educational Technology Forum, it raises the question, why could the NEP 2020 not be delayed, right? To take into account the pandemic experience, to look at what key issues were thrown up by the sudden requirement to embrace online forms of teaching. What lessons can we learn from that? What infrastructural adjustments or thrusts are required if we try to learn from that experience? So there are questions like this that arise, but the Prabhat Patnaik Committee's analysis I find very interesting for one reason. It points to one key lacuna in the NEP, and that is the fact that the NEP 2020 seems to take the commercialization of higher education as a foregone conclusion, the idea of the user paying as something that is the future of higher education, right? That's a very debatable thing, and one that we need to have much more conversation about in our country, right? I raise this idea in the context of countries like Germany, for instance, which have run a higher education model that is practically free for the longest time, right? Also, I would like to point your attention to people like Jeremy Corbyn in the UK and Bernie Sanders in the United States, both of whom hit upon commercialized education and the social burden that it resulted in the form of students crippled by heavy loans, right? And their solution for that was to advise their societies to invest in making education free, if not affordable, right? They said, don't stop at affordable, go beyond that, take the audacious step of asking for free education, for investing in free education as an investment in the future of the nation. That is a conversation that is necessary in India if you look at the history of education in India. Education has always carried the burden of powering social transformation. What happens to that history, to that legacy? There's silence about that in the NEP, and the Prabhat Patnaik committee is very correctly focused on pointing this out, right? So these are some of the distinctions and clarities from which we must approach the cultural and ethical considerations that we may need to meditate about when we are talking about the NEP. At this point, I would like to congratulate the organizers at St. Vincent Pallotti College for organizing a conference like this, right? Regardless of the quality of the speakers or the thinking or the matter of the presentations, just the fact that we have between us people who have read the NEP documents, tried to make sense of government orders, and tried to put the NEP into action, all of us coming together, right, allows for moments of sharing and moments of understanding, right, that will shape future conversations. It's a very, very timely sort of idea, and I'm very glad that this is happening. I'm very privileged that I've been asked here to come and say my to share my 2 or 3 ideas with you, right? So thank you for all of that. I hope the introductory conversation has sort of identified some of the things that shape the basic conversation that we are going to have, right? I'm going to open up the ethical considerations now, right? NEP 2020 forces us to ask the question, what is the mission of education in India, once again, because it doesn't address it fully. At one point, it boldly says we must raise the percentage of GDP invested in education to 6%, right? But it doesn't do numbers properly after that. What would 6% translate to, right? Why not more? Why only 6%? Those questions you're left with if you're reading the NEP document, right? The other ethical consideration, right, that we have to voice, that we have to think about, because it's present only in a fuzzy form in the NEP, is the second one, right? If we agree on the idea that one of the key burdens of the education system is social transformation, is providing people with the wherewithal to change their lives, right? How is that burden altered or challenged or threatened by a commercial model of education? Is it possible to state that a commercial model can still have space for social justice? How does that work? Right? That conversation we need to have. Because on the ground, experience seems to suggest that when the user pays model becomes the model of education, it also means that the person who needs education the most is the casualty. Right? What are the ways in which we can demonstrate that this can be avoided? Right? It's an important conversation for us to have. The NEP document makes certain noises about equality, about access, right? And then it does something that I find very hard to understand, right? It collapses various groups, such as the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the other backward castes, right? People with disabilities, all of them into a larger category called the SEDG, or the socially and economically disadvantaged groups. To my mind, that does a kind of disservice, because the issues and problems that operate here are very, very different and vary from context to context across India. So these ethical challenges are now given to us, right? As people in education, we are going to have to deal with it in some form or the other, right? And it's important that these conversations are reflected back, right? I told you I'm an optimist, right? I don't hold that government decisions are so strong that they cannot be challenged, cannot be changed, right? I believe in the purpose of continuous engagement, right? Because ethicality ultimately can only come from prolonged conversation, from prolonged debate. It does not arrive in one moment. It does not magically offer itself to anybody, right? The diversities that frame higher education in India need close and continued attention, and out of that, we can move towards more ethical policy making or more effective identification of lacunae and problems with whatever policy is put into play, right? Setting up the possibility of self-correction, right? So this is something that I think is now a live issue, right? Because of the multiple versions and readings that we have operating today of the NEP and its program of work, right? So that's in terms of looking at ethical considerations. We'll go over to the cultural considerations as well. I'm going to split this idea into two things. One is that of looking at culture as the larger context, and the second idea that I'm going to dwell on is the notion of institutional culture, right? The culture of institutions like yours and mine, right? Where there is a certain way of transacting with the student, with the audience, that defines the institution's identity, right? So looking at the larger cultural context, right? The NEP does several interesting things. It talks about strengthening a library movement, right? It talks about valuing the languages, right? And one of the ways in which it does this is to talk about the medium of instruction at the level of primary education. All of that is admirable, right? But I want attention to be drawn to one specific fact. Right? In India, what we have is school systems like the ICSE, like the CBSE, and like the state boards. If you ask the question, where is multilingualism most effectively being parlayed? It's a very interesting question to ask because the answers are very varied. Right? Now, at the college where I teach, I deal with students from all these backgrounds. And one of the things that I seem to find is that there is greater sort of interaction with Indian languages among students who come from the state boards. Right? The students who come from ICSE, ISE backgrounds work with Indian languages up to standard 10. But when it comes to 11 and 12, they sort of, there's very little work that happens with languages. And so they turn up as people who have forgotten an Indian language and cannot really catch up with the language that they last studied. Some of them can, but many are in a situation where they move to an option like additional English or some other language. Right? So if we are talking about looking at a multilingual focus, right, how are we going to deal with the fact that the student has some kind of access growing up to an Indian language, but it tapers off after a point, right? How productive is that? How useful is that? It's a very important question to ask. Because if you're looking at the idea of knowledge and expertise transfer, right, we need people who are multilingual. We need people who are equally comfortable in English and at least another Indian language, right? Now, if you look at what the NEP is doing with languages, it actually continues and perpetuates what I'm calling language insufficiency. Because the earlier system meant 4 semesters of work with languages. What you now have is the option of fewer semesters of work with language. You can imagine what effect it's going to have for students who have already sort of minimized their interaction with Indian languages. So somewhere, despite all the nice sounds and noises we are hearing about giving Indian languages respect, what the system ends up doing is producing a kind of vitamin deficiency when it comes to languages. We'll call it vitamin L deficiency, L for language, right? Because the student is progressively tapering off from contact with the language when actually it should be increasing, right? Because the student who is 16 or 17, right, is a student who arrives at citizenship in the language in a completely new way. It's terrible that such a student is actually at a remove from the language. And at the degree level, at 18 and 19, right, for the student to have minimal interaction with the language means that we are effectively producing citizens, right, who can only be tourists in their own language, who can talk to auto drivers, who can talk to domestic helps, right, to people like that, and cannot do any other kind of transaction, right, either abstract or technical or something else, right? English becomes the default language, right, in such a situation. I don't know if this is ideal, right? So this is one of the key failures in the NEP and its implementation, right? The possibilities of justice, of cultural justice, in terms of giving languages representation, right, needs attention. We don't really have a sound language policy across India, right? By language policies, very often what we end up doing is paying attention to dominant languages in various states. So if you have a language policy for a state like Karnataka, that language policy should give respect to Kannada as one of the dominant language of the state, but it cannot afford to forget Tulu or Konkani, right, or Kodava or Biari, right, which are like, and there are at least 14 endangered tribal languages in Karnataka, right. All of those get short shrift in a policy where the easiest way out is taken, right. Now, all of this requires money. It requires subsidies. It requires investments, right? And we don't see any indication of planning or policy when it comes to maintaining this justice, right? The language issue is important, again, if you're looking at the thrust on teaching, right? The NEP talks about how it's important for teaching to be available in the mother tongue. How are you going to make it happen if graduates have only limited interaction with their mother tongue, right? Or have expertise only in a dominant language but not in their mother tongue, right? So those situations are not addressed at all, right? When actually creative effort and work should go in those directions, right? The second idea that also comes up is the idea of whose culture, right? Now, currently, our intelligent politicians in Karnataka, right, are about to step into another headline-grabbing activity, which is that of certain scriptures being made mandatory in educational institutions. It's again a lost opportunity because I think it might have been a much better idea for us to look at it in terms of people encountering each other's faiths, each other's religions, right? And going through a process of value clarification by understanding and respecting each other's religions, right? I think that's something that our constitution demands of us and something that we can all easily invest in, right? For minority institutions, it becomes an opportunity, right? An opportunity to be proactive, to lead the way in terms of encouraging interfaith activity, curiosity, dialogue, right? Rather than, some hasty sort of formulation of what is necessary for young people to have good values, right? I spoke of the distinction between culture as context and institutional culture. What I mean by this is that with the multiple entry exit option, right, what seems to have been set in motion is possibly a Darwinian struggle between institutions, right? Earlier, if a student joined a college, you could reasonably suppose that the student would complete the degree from that college, right? But if you are saying multiple entry exit, it means that students can game the system to the extent where some institutions at least, are reduced to the status of waiting rooms or clearing houses, right? Because the way people will look at it, one possibility at least, is for students to look at, you have situations in Delhi, for instance, where you need 96% to get into a BA. You don't get into the institution of your choice in the first year, right? All you have to do is go to another institution where the cutoff is not so high, and therefore that institution gets relegated to a kind of tier 2 or a tier 3 status. You bide your time for 2 semesters there, and then you take advantage of the multiple entry exit provision, and you try to arrive at the institution you want to pass out from, right? Now, this is one thing that is going to definitely impact institutional culture, because it will make things very shaky for some institutions, right? And make their survival itself a very problematic sort of thing. right? I'm not sure if that is any kind of advantage given the way systems work in our country. Talking about the academic bank of credits, one point I would like to also point out is that the NHEQF limits the operation of the academic bank of credits. Right? So there's a time period during which the credits are effective. Right? It's about 5 years or 6 years, I think. I forget the exact number of years. And after that, the student has to go through a process of recertification of credentials. Right? So to come back to my original point, right? Institutional culture is now going to be under challenge, right? A, because of the kind of credit workload that Karnataka NEP mandates. So it's a Karnataka specific problem, but a larger problem is that of institutional culture being either diluted or reduced to nothing by the fact that streams of students are likely to go in and out of institutions. We have to wait and see how that plays out. I started by saying that I am an optimist, and from that position of optimism, I'd like to open up some solutions, some responses. Right? The first response I would advise is greater vigilance. Right? Whether you're in an autonomous college or an affiliated college, right? It's important to read these documents and to respond to them, right? And to also read these documents from an institutional viewpoint. So each institution must invest in this process. It's going to take about 5 years for all these things to become clear, right? And it's important for a kind of thinking where we read each of these new documents as we come out, both from the point of view of the strengths of the institution and the weaknesses or the challenges that the institution is facing. Right? A kind of proactivity, I think, is something that will go a long way to helping institutions gear up and meet the challenges that are emerging, right? Not just from the NEP, but from the fact that the NEP is slowly going to break up into multiple versions, into multiple iterations. The second solution or response that I would advise is that of reading your situation really carefully in order to build a learning culture that works. Because the NEP, the grand statements of the NEP don't answer that question, right? So if you have an approach that involves looking at possibilities in these documents, gray areas in these documents, right, ambiguities in these documents, it also becomes a way of starting to ask enabling questions. That is, how do you build this learning culture that will work for us, right? Another important response is responses such as this conference, where it's possible for people from different levels of experience, different kinds of experience of the NEP to network, to share their learning, to share their problems, to share their experiences. I'm, for instance, now very incensed about the manner in which the idea of skill enhancement courses has been very narrowly interpreted in Karnataka. Because the NHEQF seems to see skill enhancement in a much broader and much more affirmative sort of thing. It doesn't see skill enhancement as something that has to be reduced to artificial intelligence and a set of IT-related things. It sees them as arising from the disciplines that are available in the institution, from expertise that is available in the institution. Right? So it's important for these experiences and problems to be shared extensively, because it then becomes probable that local solutions, local workarounds can be built up. Right? It's important also to build networks of justice and self-help. Right? Each institution is likely to have some institutional destiny that it seeks for itself, some goal in terms of doing good, right? The danger of these documents and their intentions is that it becomes very difficult for us to persist with these notions of justice through the institution. Right? It's important whether you're a minority institution or your focus area is underprivileged students or disabled students. It's important for us to begin to network, right, in order to make the possibilities of justice work better. Right? I hold, for instance, that it's not enough to just have reservations for people from underprivileged communities. We need to invest in much more elaborate support systems. Right? Why, for instance, can we not extend the idea of midday meal support from the schools to institutions of higher education, to colleges? Right? It's something that would make a material difference to students who are struggling to earn a living and get an education. Right? Can we look for public-private partnerships where the government can be invited to join? But if they are not willing to join, institutions can nevertheless find public support to provide extra support, extra systems of support, right, for those in need of the justice that education can bring. Right? This requires imagination, it requires courage, right? And I think we should not forget to continue to invest in these things. Right? The last suggestion, again made out of the optimism out of which I speak, is for every institution to have the courage to be autonomous in vision and spirit. Right? In terms of what you want for your students, what you want for your faculty, right? The system may eventually come around to saying we will allow you to be degree-giving colleges, right? But that arrangement will work well, and an institutional culture will survive only when we take this step forward to dream and to practice an autonomy of vision and spirit, whatever the vagaries of the affiliating system may be. Right? These are some of the things that I thought I should share with you, right, as we consider ethical and cultural aspects as they arise from the implementation of the NEP in Karnataka. If there are questions or quarrels with what I'm saying, I'm quite happy to listen and to learn and to respond if need be. Please let me know.
Thank you, sir, for the session. I will just check if there are any questions which are posted in the chat box for us. Sir, they have not posted any questions. I think Professor Jeevan Kumar has posted a question as to, do you think multicultural education, 1 minute, sir. I'll just check the chat box.
Yeah, I can see the question. Hello, Professor Jeevan. Nice to meet you in this slightly disembodied form. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. Let me try to respond to this. The idea of multicultural education, I think the NEP makes some concessions and some token sort of acceptance of this idea, right? So I will give them credit for that, right? But the question of how do you make it happen on the ground, right? That requires training, it requires investments, it requires structures, right? And for that, it cannot happen unless the government is willing to spend the money, right? For somebody to understand the sort of hardships of a Dalit student's life, right? If you want people to be taken to those contexts, to understand those contexts, to encounter a world different from your own, right? Institutions will need support, right? They will need various kinds of support. They may not be able to manage it all by themselves, right? I heartily endorse any idea of the student being translated out of their world into other worlds. But the question that is always there, the question of who pays the piper, right? The government has to simply climb off this free market perspective, this user pays perspective, and look at building partnerships. I think good public-private partnerships are possible in terms of making education multicultural, multilingual, and multidimensional. Right? And I'm all for an upshot of that kind. Right? Thank you for the question, Professor G.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Any other questions? The participants can post it on the chat box so that Sir could answer them. Any further questions?
I think since we are close to lunchtime,
yes, sir.
Right, questions may come later. Right. Thank you very much for having me. Right. If you have questions, please do raise them. There will be other fora where we can interact and go over these questions. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for sharing your expertise on what NHEQF was also, which was very new topic to us, I would say, and discussing on what is ethical consideration in NEP also, and coming to institutional culture and how do we build on language policy in higher education institutions also. Thank you so much for sharing your information, sir. On behalf of the management and all the teaching fraternity, I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. Arulmani, for taking out his precious time and accepting our invitation to be the resource person. Thank you, sir, for the informative session. We would break. Thank you, sir. Participants, kindly note that we would break for lunch and resume back with paper presentations by 1:30. And the links for the different paper presentations based on your department is being or field of research is being posted on the chat box. Kindly log in through those links for your paper presentations, and we will join back to the main link which is sent on the program schedule for the technical session 4 by Professor Jeevan by 3 p.m. Any clarifications, participants, please do let me know. For your paper presentations, you would have to join a different link where you would be presenting your papers. And for technical session 4, you would have to join the main Gmeet link by 3 p.m. for the 4th session by Professor Jeevan. And the links are posted on your chat box. Thank you all once again, and we will meet in technical session 4 post-lunch.